You know, your balls get in a pinch and a bind when you're sitting in the seat. It's hot. They stick to you.
Yeah.
You know how it is. You're in Arizona. It gets hot down there. Got to use the seed bag sometimes.
Recorded live from Studio 12A in sunny Phoenix, Arizona. You're listening to the Josh and Friends Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the Josh and Friends Podcast. I am your host. My name is Josh. And this week, we are here to discuss the 80s. The year is 1984. And some of the top movies at the box office include Ghostbusters, The Karate Kid, Gremlins, and Footloose. Popular TV shows this year included Family Ties, The Cosby Show, and The A-Team. And the famous Wendy's commercial had us all asking, where's the beef? But we are here to discuss the year in rock. And joining me in today's discussion is my old buddy, Big John. And we'll be selecting our top 5 favorite rock albums from 1984, as well as some fun stories and interesting tidbits to go along with our picks. So let's get right into this and help me welcome back to the show. He is the one and only Mr. John Rasich. Johnny boy! What's going on, buddy?
I just put up one of my paintings to hide the mess.
To hide the mess. Is that a sticky note on the back of the...
Yeah.
It is?
You never know what you're going to need to make a painting.
All right, that's awesome. But okay, John, we are here today to discuss the rock albums of 1984. So, are you ready for this, man? This is a big year.
I'm ready.
It's a huge year for movies. This was like one of the best years for movies. They always talk about like one of the greatest years for movies.
Yeah.
What we're gonna do real quick here, we're gonna name off our top 5. But first, we're gonna name off our top 4. Then we're gonna do our runner-ups into our top picks. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to your picks because they're always, a little oddballish. So
it was tough, man. I had to pick a rule to follow to keep it semi-cohesive. I had to keep rewriting it. I was like, no, that's all over the place. So
all right.
That's kind of how I fit in my alternates because they were a little bit outside the rules. Although I did break one rule in the top 5, so you can get excited for that right now.
Well, I'm excited. Let's do it. So, Johnny, what do you have for your number 5 spot?
So I started number 5 with Metallica, Ride the Lightning.
Great pick.
It was one of the main paving stones to bring metal into, mainstream. There's plenty other bands that had started that path before them. Maiden. Man, it is a raw and fast album, just like Prom Night. And Dave Mustaine, he still had a few songwriting credits on there, so that's really cool. It wasn't their first album, but it was a really good album. A lot of good songs. And I didn't listen to it at the time it came out, so it was a little bit hard to fit into the whole nostalgia category that I'm basing this list off of. But it's just too hard to dismiss it as not one of the top albums for what it accomplished.
There's a lot of people that did not listen to that album when it first came out. So yeah.
Well, who did we know that got us into this stuff?
That would be Big E, Mr. Ethan McDonald.
Yeah. Had it not been for him, I don't know how long it would have took me to find this album, but after hearing it, 10 years after it came out, it was easily to know that it was an important album.
Absolutely. So, all right, for my number 5 spot, I went with a childhood favorite. And this album was super important to me because I love the music videos. They were always kind of fun and amusing. You know, that's kind of how our generation kind of like got started with a lot of music.
MTV, yeah.
And I wasn't big into Boy George back then because he was a little too soft, a little too weird and pretty. But this guy was weird and scary, and he rocked. And you know, for my little 8-year-old self, getting into music, you know, right around this time, it was just perfect for an introduction to Twisted Sister, Stay Hungry. So I was a big fan of that album. I mean, that had obviously the rock anthems, We're Not Gonna Take It, and I Wanna Rock, and as the title track, Stay Hungry. And you know what also has in here? It also has that song from Pee-wee's Big Adventure when they're...
I was going to bring that up.
Yes! Burn in Hell!
Burn in Hell! I love that part.
Yeah.
I actually looked for that on the album after I saw Pee-wee Herman Big Adventure, and I saw it was on there. I was like, yes!
So awesome. Yeah, so I love that. That has a soft spot in my heart. So that is my number 5 album. Johnny, what do you have sitting at your number 4 spot?
I'm going to go with Bruce, Born in the USA, because America.
Huge album.
So most of my list is basically nostalgia, what it brings back from childhood memories. And this gave me a lot of good memories from one time we were camping out Lake Wenatchee, sitting by the campfire, and we had this playing over the old boom box, just, you know, sitting around the campfire, enjoying life as a kid, camping. And I just remember Dancing in the Dark playing while I looked at my cheap Payless shoe source sneakers melting by the fire because I had them too close. And that's just some weird memory I had about that album. But I mean, Born in the USA, obviously the biggest hit off there. This is a really good song. I mean, most people think it's about, you know, American pride and stuff like that, and they don't really listen to the lyrics. And it's more about just speaking up for these struggles of the working class, which is kind of important to me. And so I appreciated that. And yeah, there's a lot of good stuff on that album. Kind of skyrocketed Bruce into the limelight there.
Absolutely. Well, John, it's funny that you say that because sitting at my number 4 is Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA. So yeah, I'm just gonna add to what you said. Basically, it's by far his biggest album. It's huge. It, like you said, he was already big. He was already big at the time, but this launched him into superstar status. He was a monster after this. And so much so that it was like one of those things where, kind of like a Fleetwood Mac Rumors. It was like, how do you follow that up?
Yeah.
You can't. So he did something completely different. But, this has Born in the USA, obviously, and Dancing in the Dark with John's shoes melting in the fire. Glory Days, Cover Me, My Hometown, I'm on Fire, which might have been kind of cool to listen to next to the fire with it. And even the B-side of Dancing in the Dark was Pink Cadillac. You remember that old
oh yeah. My mom loved that song.
It's a crazy nostalgic album because it was so big you couldn't escape it. You know what I remember? I remember this one. It was so big that it even got into like TV shows. I remember Who's the Boss? Remember Who's the Boss?
Yep.
And the cute girl at the time, what was her name? Anyway, we all know her name. I can't remember her name. But anyway, she was like, I'm going to a Bruce Springsteen concert. It was like after this came out. And I was like, remember that. And I was like, oh man, maybe if I went to a Bruce Springsteen concert, I'd be able to meet her and, Courtney Cox dancing, getting pulled up on the stage.
Heck yeah.
But yeah,
never know.
Yeah, so I thought that this album's almost just too big not to put on the list.
Exactly.
Even if you wanted to, you're like, listen, fuck Bruce Springsteen. You're like, you can't really, it's kind of hard. It's just so solid of an album. There's a reason why it sold like 400 million albums or whatever it did.
Yeah.
So
and that's how I felt about keeping some albums off of here. It was really hard because they were so big.
Not that that's my kind of, criteria. It's just, that one happens to be, there's a reason why certain albums sell so many, copies. It's because they're that good, You can, it's not like payola, like on the radio. You're like, man, this is a shitty song. Is getting a lot of play on the radio. Well, that's because they send a bunch of coke to the DJ and the program director, and that's why they keep spinning it over and over. Albums are different. Albums are real people have to go in and they have to buy those albums. So yeah, that's the difference in there. All right, John, number 3. What do you have for your number 3 spot?
So this one was a surprise to me because I had never heard it up until you brought up this list. And after combing through the 75 albums you sent me?
A lot.
I was blazing through those things. A lot of them I never heard or avoided just because I knew I wouldn't like them. But this band, I just happened to take a moment, and I love this album. Like, I'm going to be listening to this like for a while, and this is the Minutemen, Double Nickels on the Dime.
Oh yeah. Doesn't that sound like it came out like not in this year? It sounds like it came out like, I don't know, like earlier or later. I don't know. It sounds like almost like a college radio like album that came out like later.
Easy. And so they pretty much got this art rock punk style from like the 80s New York area, like Richard Hell and the Voidoids. The Television Band, and it's also kind of mixed with that Cali funk style that Red Hot Chili Peppers kind of grew out of.
Yeah.
And I just there's something about that whole era of the 80s New York that I've always been infatuated with, so it kind of hit me there. And when I looked up where they're from and I saw they're from San Pedro, I was kind of blown away because I was like, oh, they're from New York City, totally. And so yeah, San Pedro is the home of my BFF, and it's also the home of the worst Denny's I've ever eaten at. so that kind of got a soft spot right there. But they really did influence John Frusciante and Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers, and you could totally hear the influence on their earlier stuff. So I thought that was kind of cool. A lot of people are so sick of the Red Hot Chili Peppers now that they discredit them, but they were a big band.
Yeah, they were huge.
Totally.
They were huge. Big deal.
And I love this album.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad that, this is part of the fun of doing this list is like exposing us to new, old music.
Yeah.
Because there's so much music that's like, it's kind of impossible to even listen to,
What options did we have back then? You knew somebody, or if it was on the radio, it wasn't going to be some obscure thing, or you just happened to buy this record or CD, or actually in our day, it was a cassette tape on a whim because it sounded cool or the cover art was neat.
Yeah.
You know how many crappy albums I bought because the band name sounded cool or the cover art was sweet?
I bet a lot.
Yeah.
You're right. Because basically we had the radio to listen to, or, driving around with our parents or whatever. And then you had MTV, and they're only going to play specific types of music, Yep. I mean, they just started playing Michael Jackson, in the early 80s, or, 80, when did they start playing Michael Jackson? Like 83 or something like that on the radio, or on the TV. So unless it was like in the middle of the night, and we weren't like, at that time we weren't like in the middle of the night staying up all night, but like, so yeah, I don't know. There's tons of, it's like what you said about Metallica. Like we weren't listening to Metallica unless you have some, seedy low life guy that's like, into beating people up, he's like, hey man, have you heard this group? I like to beat the shit out of people while I'm listening to this. I'm like, whoa, no, but it's intriguing. Like, what is this?
Listen to it or I'm going to put you in a headlock.
Cause like that, you want to talk about not getting radio airplay. There's a reason why nobody heard those Metallica albums.
Yeah.
In the early 80s, it's like they weren't getting played, but the people that did know about them, they were raving about them. And the bands that, knew about them coming up and stuff like that. So yeah, they were awesome. But
yeah, and I think a reason why Minutemen never made it bigger than they did is the main guy, he died in a car crash.
Oh shit, really?
And so they just never got to build off of what they established on that album.
Oh, that sucks.
They had a second album, but this was definitely their big hitter. It's got like freaking 45 songs on it, and they're like 2 minutes each.
It sounds like something like the Ramones would do.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, all right. So, Johnny, for my number 3, this might be a little controversial to people listening out there. Not because the album sucks. It's because of the Nickelback factor. Kind of like, just, looking back, you're like, man, that guy's like not cool. But like, there were some good songs at the time that came out. And it's like, he's almost kind of like the Canadian version of Rod Stewart. And it's like, there's some really good songs on the first 2 albums, but on the second album is where this guy, Bryan Adams, Reckless. This album, I think people forget how good this album really is. It is a monster.
Album.
It is a huge album. So yeah, he went from like being a true rocker back in the day to like, kind of soft, soft
You got
songs.
the Chicago.
Yeah,
Chicago deal where they got cut to the really sappy.
Everything I do it for you.
I'll be right here. Wait, that's Richard Marx. No,
Same thing.
yeah, right. It's like so basically, yeah. This had the big singles off this album are "Summer of '69," "Run to You," and the ballad "Heaven." So like the first 2 albums are like actual rock albums, but then this one has like "One Night Love Affair," "Somebody," "Kids Wanna Rock," "It's Only Love," which is the Tina Turner duet kind of song. And yeah, so basically it never got better than this. It was pretty much all downhill from here. But if I was fortunate enough to have an album that good, this is a really, really solid album. And
Basically
that's
his greatest hits minus 1 or 2 songs. If you exclude the really awful sappy stuff.
Yeah, like what were some of those songs? Never, never, ever, ever, never, like they're so sappy. Yeah. So, but yeah, no, I think that this is a very good album, and it's kind of like one of those things where I'm like, oh wow, man, I forgot all these songs were on this album, and when I revisited it, I was like, I thought this was like a greatest hits or something, because I think he has a greatest hits out, and they have a lot of these songs, but there's a lot of songs that aren't on the greatest hits that were played on the radio, and they are like rockin' songs. So I don't know what happened to you, Bryan Adams, but at least you had this album. All right. So, Johnny, what do you have for your number 2 spot? Man, we're just racing through this sucker.
Yeah, no kidding. So, strangely enough, this happened earlier, but my number 2 is Reckless by Bryan Adams.
Oh, there you go, man.
Hey, dude, it's a solid pop rock album.
It is. I would almost say it's not only pop rock, because there's pop rock songs on it, but there's like just straight ahead rock. Like, I obviously would not call it hard rock or heavy metal, but it's right in that genre of just solid rock songs.
The one thing this really got me, the nostalgia, hit me right on the nostalgia bone was, I remember listening to his music when I was little, and it kind of made me think about what it was going to be like to be in love when I was older. I don't know if you ever got that feeling when you're little, like what it's going to be like to have a girlfriend, and that you don't know what it is, but you kind of feel it already.
Yeah.
Pre-puberty. I don't know how old, I can't remember how old I was, 10, 11.
And he looks a lot cooler on the album cover of this than he was in his videos. You're like, you see some of his videos, you're like, Jesus Christ, you're a fucking nerd. Nerd alert. But yeah, I don't know.
There's a lot of nerds in the 80s.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of cool guys too, because like that really was the difference between like superstars with the cool videos, and then you have some of the dorkier, nerdy guys. But that worked too sometimes, like
Well, there was the guys like Phil Collins who were popular before MTV came out, and so they started making videos. And we all were like, "Wow, that guy looks like a real nerd."
Yeah, MTV has got to be one of those things
to deny.
Yeah. He's like, he was one of those guys who was so oversaturated that it made him, but like broke him as well. Because you're like, all right, now you're stuck. Like, okay, between Genesis and you're releasing an album every year, which is prolific, but it's like also you're gonna get like the John Racich burnout. You're like, I'm getting burned out of this, And by the early 90s, you're like, oh, he's like, because he was always kind of like a little bald, but he always kind of had like the long hair. And you're like, oh, this looks kind of cool still, right? And he was like wearing like the 80s clothes. But then by the 90s, you're like, oh, he's wearing like dad jeans. And now he's like balding to the point where like he looks like a dad.
What was that? They call that hairstyle the skullet. Where you can see their skull, but he's still got a mullet.
Yeah. He's really partying in the... partying in the back, not in the front.
Yeah. No business up front.
Yeah, not much business going up in front, but there's a lot of partying going on in the back. So so I'm at my number 2. Right?
Yes.
Okay, so my number 2, John. Now this one is just like you said, man. Just like you said. I wasn't aware of this album. Not many people were, because it wasn't pop, and that's what got played on the radio for the most part. But my number 2 is Ride the Lightning by Metallica. And such a killer record. I'm just going to add on to what you already said. Their first album was Kill 'Em All. I like their first album, but I don't love their first album, and I think it's the production.
Yeah.
The production is very raw, and their songs
too raw.
Yeah, the songs are good, and I just think that everything came together on this album. Like the production is awesome. The songs, like the build up of the songs, kind of like For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Oh yeah.
And Ride the Lightning is an amazing song. They just crush it with that song, and I mean all the concert like Creeping Death and. And the song that a lot of the people from the first album, because the first album didn't let up, it just kept going like crazy. But this album, this is the first time they were ever accused of selling out. They said that Fade to Black was the first time they sold out, which is a fantastic song.
On the second album, we had a song called Fade to Black that we still play almost at every show. And James thought it would be a great idea to have acoustic guitars on the album. And so when the metal community heard a Metallica song with acoustic guitars, they all lost their fucking lunches.
So I love that song, but also Fight Fire with Fire and The Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah.
I love that. That's an instrumental. That's a great song.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things off of the first album was the songs just sounded so thin. Like they just didn't have the body. And I think that's just production, total production, like you said. This one, the songs definitely had a lot more body to them. Like they were thicker.
Yeah, and it sounded like a more complete album. It was just like, you have that, I don't know, just the way the songs start and everything about the album is just, and it's like to me, it's their first like classic album cover, like the lightning, the fucking, everything's just awesome about this album. I love this album so much. I think it's worthy of being in, obviously it's, in your top 5, it's my top 2. And again, I wasn't even aware of it. That's how good it is. And I think it's like one of those albums too, where, rock music was not like this back then. And this album holds up so well. Like you could play this to someone now and they're not going to say, oh, fucking, what is this, 1984 song? No, you're not going to think that because it doesn't sound like a 1984 song. It sounds like a modern, fantastic, hard rock, heavy metal album, which stands amongst one of their best. It's
what they always say, like, either their top, this one and Master Puppets and Justice, Kill 'Em All. People throw Kill 'Em All in there as well. I'd throw What's Called in there, but I'm a loser sellout. No, because that exposed me to the band, the Black Album.
You can't deny that album.
Well, no, that's the album. Listen, okay, so they sold out for that album. All right, they got Bob Rock. So what? Bob Rock made them gajillionaires. and what happened when people heard that album? Then they're like, well, fuck, I need to hear more Metallica. And what did they do? They went back and they discovered all the old great albums. So,
brought people into the fold.
Exactly. And I can think of a few bands like that, but nobody quite like that. That one, I remember everybody then going, oh man, yeah, like these are the good albums. Even like people that didn't listen to Metallica before, then they're like, then they're judging and shaming people that listen to the Black Album. I was like, whatever, shut up. So all right. So we had a couple of same albums in the top 5, but Johnny, before we do our number 1 selections, it is time for your runner-ups. So, Johnny, what do you have as your runner-ups for top rock albums of 1984?
So I got 20 runner-ups.
Excuse me?
I'm just kidding. I got 2. I settled on 2.
Okay.
I could have easily done more, but I felt 2 was fair. My first runner-up would be The Replacements, Let It Be.
Okay.
Not just because it was named after the Beatles album, but these guys are major influence on Kurt Cobain and Billy Joe Armstrong. This is another group that I never heard until, 5-10 years ago. I always heard about them, but knowing Paul Westerberg was the front man, didn't he have some corny songs that he put out in the 90s?
I ain't dying to offend. I've got a dyslexic heart.
And so I was like, I don't want to listen to them. I don't want to listen to that corny shit from the 80s. But to find out there's some like punk band from the Midwest who were just a bunch of knuckleheads raising hell. I thought that was pretty cool. They had some really good songs on this album. It was like close to their greatest hits. They had I Will Dare, Androgynous, and The Favorite Thing are probably my top 3. And a funny thing about that song Androgynous is the whole reason he wrote it was Paul Westerberg just thought the word was cool, so he wrote a whole song about it.
I mean, it is kind of a cool
word.
word.
I can respect that.
It sounds very John Race-y.
Yeah. Hey, I like the smell. I'm going to write a whole story about it. So that'd be my first runner-up.
Nice. Okay, so what other runner-ups do you have? What else you got?
Okay, my second of 2 runner-ups is Power Slave by Maiden. And this is kind of along the lines of Metallica, just a great metal album. They win the best album cover. Maiden always has the best album covers, so there was no contest. They helped lead the valiant fight against hair metal bands, along with Anthrax, who had an album out the same year. Metallica and Dio also helped. Dio was kind of hair metal, but he was actual metal. You look at his album covers and you're like, this is hair metal, but you listen to him, you're like, this is not hair metal.
I've heard a lot of those guys say back in the day that even if we wanted to be hair metal guys, we couldn't be hair metal guys. So we kind of had no choice. We were like, all right, well, those guys are too pretty. Like we're not Poison. So, but not that they would want to be Poison. I'm just saying. A lot of those guys I've heard say, like, can you imagine, like, Lemmy's like, oh, I want to be a glam guy now. I want to be like, Vince Neil in 1983.
That would be interesting to see Lemmy like that. You have his beard all fluffed out, his mustache.
Big old wart. What do they do with his wart? Do they make it into a beauty mark?
Maybe. Put glitter on it or something. Yeah, and it's still, got to say this, the same as the Hall of Fame episode, it's still a crime. They're not in the Hall of Fame.
It is. Yeah.
And one thing I thought was kind of funny is all the songs have like serious names and it's all like serious metal, but the song "Lost for Words," it's an instrumental, has no words. I thought that was funny.
That is funny.
So they're lost for words. They don't have no words.
Okay, so my first runner-up is, I went right with you, man. Iron Maiden. I know that many fans out there recognize Powerslave as their best album. So we have to like acknowledge this album because it's not my style, but I just, I couldn't get into it myself. I know Ethan tried. It was like one of the few bands that like I could usually find something. I love Run to the Hills. That's about as much as I get into early Maiden. I know it's just too much. To me, it's like
I have a hard time with that singing style. But there's definitely songs where they don't do that. I'm like, oh shit, they should have done this instead. I love this.
Right. But the music
Fear
is
the Dark. Always so good.
Yeah. And like you said, best album cover of the year. Ethan had that giant poster that was like, 15 feet high that was in his room. And that was Powerslave. So I want to acknowledge that. But I also wanted to give credit to some other huge albums that I failed to put in my top 5, but only because they were too poppy. They just didn't, and they didn't really fit. I guess some people can kind of consider them rock, but I like them, but they're not really rock. Kind of like, Wham's Make It Big and Prince's Purple Rain. Even though Prince plays guitar and it's very, pop, right? And then Heartbeat City by the Cars, all fantastic albums, but just it was my way of weeding out some of these so I can possibly come up with a list. So
I had Cars on my list, but it just wasn't their best album. It had a few really pretty good songs, but you go back a year or two, and that's like peak Cars right there.
Oh my God, their first album is one of my favorite albums of all time.
Yep.
So great. My official runner-up has to go to the Pretenders with their album Learning to Crawl. Some of the most enjoyable songs are included on this record, like Middle of the Road, Back on the Chain Gang. It also includes the song My City Was Gone, which has one of the best bass lines of all time. And it has the Christmas tune 2,000 Miles. It also has the rockabilly song Thumbelina. So
I probably took that album off my list and put it back on 2 to 3 times. I really like this album. So I agree. I think the whole top rock title of the podcast kind of is what influenced me to like fumble it back and forth.
Yeah.
But I agree. The album is an amazing album.
Yeah, it's a good album. And it was like one of their bigger albums.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. Chrissie Hynde, are the Pretenders in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? I don't know. I don't know if they are. Probably not.
I used to think it was Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, but I used to think it was Tom Petty and the Pretenders, and I get them mixed up when I was little.
I can see that. All right, Johnny. Are we ready? Are we ready for number 1? Let's do it. Let's do this. Alrighty. What do you got for your number 1, buddy?
Okay. So it was named after the year, so it has to be number 1. Van Halen, 1984.
Van Halen, 1984.
Yeah. Amazing album, start to finish. There's not many albums that are good all the way through. And you can't just sit down and listen to the whole thing without wanting to skip 1 or 2 of them. And this album was one of those albums, so you can't deny something like that. It's peak Van Halen, in my opinion.
You got that right.
Much better. They didn't get much better. They had moments, maybe a moment here or there, but solid, man. Hot for Teacher brought me into puberty. Video, good stuff.
Great stuff.
And you know what I'm going to say about Panama.
Oh yeah, reach down between your legs, Ease the seed bag.
I still hear it, man. I know the lyrics now, but I still hear it.
Well, what would you do if Dave came out like years later and he goes, "It's actually what I said, man. We wrote it differently in the lyrics, but yeah."
I'd probably quietly say woohoo to myself and then feel a sense of accomplishment. And that's probably as far as I go. Maybe send you a text.
I could see him easing the seed bag back then.
Yeah, dude. He's totally a ball grabbing dude. You know, your balls get in a pinch in a bind when you're sitting in the seat. It's hot. They stick to you.
Yeah.
You know how it is. You're in Arizona. It gets hot down there. Got to use the seed bag sometimes.
Oh, God.
And one fact I did see on there that I didn't know that I thought was really cool is, so when they were writing "I'll Wait," they were like having a little writer's block, struggling, and they had Michael McDonald help them finish it.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa.
It's so crazy.
No way.
Yeah, isn't that a weird story? You're like, what?
Yeah.
Like, Michael McDonald.
Of all people, I'd be like, Yacht Rock Michael McDonald?
Right. Love that song.
Yeah, great song.
So
great album.
John, let's just cut the bullshit. It's 1984. I don't think anybody, come on. Nobody's picking anything else than this. I mean, if you do, I'm questioning it. Like I'm like, are you serious? Like, what? You're really picking something other than this album? Listen,
I wanted to because I knew you were going to pick it.
Listen, it's one of those albums where how could you not pick this album? John, they were the coolest rock band in the world at this point in time. This made them massive superstars. Of course, this album made them the biggest rock stars on the planet, and then they broke up right after it, which is disgusting. But this is their peak, probably artistically, like you said. Nothing even comes close for me on this list. Like nothing. Like any one of these other albums, like they're not even close. This is one of the biggest albums of the 80s. It's one of the best albums of the 80s, let alone of this year. I still remember being, like you said, mesmerized by the videos. Videos were all cool. They were all cool. Jump, Panama, Hot for T-shirt. I'll Wait is a great song. That's one of my favorite. I always go.
It's a sleeper, dude.
For me, sometimes I just go straight to that song. I love that song so much. The build-up of that song is so good. Yeah. But even the album tracks, man, like Drop Dead Legs, Top Jimmy, House of Pain, it's flawless. It's flawless, like you said. Dude, there's not many albums that you could just turn it on and then let it go and have the all these guys, super cool dudes, even like it made Michael Anthony made it cool to be like a cool chubby guy, like back in the day. He was like, he had that, what was that guitar that he had with the Jack Daniels guitar? And then you had, David Lee Roth doing the acrobatics on stage and, the crazy drumming, like the intro for Hot for Teacher. And of course cool. You have Eddie,
Yeah. Flying around on bungee cords on Jump.
Yeah. It's awesome. It's awesome. So this is the top album of 1984. And if you say otherwise, you are wrong. So, yeah. Yeah. So, John, any final thoughts on the greatest albums of 1984?
So just going back to Van Halen, it was kind of interesting. I was reading how Eddie was really wanting to start bringing synthesizers into the mix, and everybody else was fighting it. And so this was the first album they brought him in, and look what you end up with.
Yeah.
I mean, they got a little heavy on the synthesizers later on, and it got a little corny in my opinion, but they nailed it on that one.
Yeah, because I've always been a big fan of, if you're going to use synthesizers in like rock songs like that, like they should add to the music. You know what I mean? Like, unless you're going to just be a synthesizer band, which is fine. I love synth rock and electro funk and all that. I love me some Chromeo and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, if you're like a band like this, you're known as being like a rock band. Like David Lee Roth, I get where David Lee Roth is coming from, because if you listen to the next Van Halen album, there's some songs like Love Walks In. I can't listen. I can't listen to that song. And I'm like, oh, geez, that's offensive. That's offensive. Some of the songs on there are not so offensive, but to me, and Sean Greenfield, if you're listening to this, just cover your ears, because I know you're a big, 5150 fan. Listen, to me, I like to Eat 'em and Smile. I'm more of an Eat 'em and Smile guy than I am a 5150 guy. So it's just me. It's just a different story for different folks. I'm a David Lee Roth guy. I love Sammy Hagar solo. I like him on some songs with Van Halen, but I'm a David Lee Roth guy.
I'm talking about it.
So,
hell yeah, brother.
Yeah. So John, are there any other runner-ups that you have?
Yeah, I mean, if I go off that list of 75, I could probably say something about half of them.
Yeah,
the Dokken album was kind of cool, and I always made fun of them just because their name sounded stupid. But I was like, "This is a pretty solid album."
Well, John, you gotta keep on rocking, just like Dokken. Got to keep on rocking with Dokken. Yeah, no, Dokken that was a pretty big rock album that year. A lot of these albums, there's like a couple of songs on the album, that I really like, but the full albums aren't, my favorite.
Yeah, that's how I made it easy to eliminate a bunch of the bands. Was these two tracks are amazing, but the rest of the album, I can't even connect with them.
Yeah, and what's funny is the album "The Works" by Queen had a few big songs on it.
Radio Gaga.
Yeah, what's funny is I used to that song used to bug the shit out of me. And you'd be like, Radio Gaga, Radio Goo Goo, and I'm like, and I'm like, but if you see that live at Live Aid, it's
live.
Like insane. Like,
that's the only time I've ever actually enjoyed listening to that song, and it was awesome.
Yeah,
and the biopic that they did, Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah,
was that the name of it?
Yeah, Bohemian Rhapsody. Yeah,
that movie that just recently came out, and that performance, they reenacted it, and I was like, dude, that was pretty sweet.
Yeah, it was.
So I went back and watched the old actual concert, and I was like, hell yeah, dude.
Dude, they need to do something with that. They need to put some. I know there's been documentaries about that, but they need to make a better documentary, because they certainly can. That's a crazy story. There's so many different storylines within that. When did that? I think it was just over a day. They were doing it in London and Philadelphia, and they were just going back and forth with all these songs. And then what's his name even flew on the Concorde. he played in London, and he flew on the Concorde, and then played in Philadelphia, which is insane. So
what's weird is they had so many huge festivals in the 80s that didn't get the attention that they kind of deserved, or at least the recorded to history, so that people in the future could go back and look. Like Woodstock, it was just a bunch of dirty hippies hanging out, and look how much coverage that got. And it was an awesome festival.
Yeah, I think that part of the issue is too, though. I can't believe this. So they made a film documentary of Woodstock. That's why there's so much great footage of it. They had a film crews and stuff, actually filming film, right? For the Live Aid, it was just all they have is this shitty coverage that was literally just broadcasting live on TV. And I was like,
they didn't even think to record that greatness like they did for Woodstock. They put so much care into getting every bit of Woodstock.
And Woodstock had great artists, but they didn't
Oh yeah,
Live Aid had probably 5 times as many bigger stars that were performing. If I could go back in time, I'm filming that. I'm documenting this on actual high quality as high quality as you can get for back then.
Yeah.
Film. I'm spending all my money.
50-pound VHS.
Right. I'm paying a film crew. I like how I have money to do this. I just go back and do this. But yeah, I'm like, trust me, we need to film this. Put this together so we can have less than shitty video, in 25 years when YouTube comes out.
Now we got a good reason to go back in time.
Yeah.
To document some really big historical moments in music.
That's a good topic for an episode. What would you go back and do? I know what.
Yeah, dude.
I know what Quentin Tarantino would do.
Oh God.
But
something to do with feet.
That is not where I was going, but I'm glad you went there. That is fantastic. Oh man, that's great. All right, Johnny. I think we're gonna wrap it up, buddy.
Sounds good to me. I'm about out of gas anyways.
All right, buddy. Well, hey, I thank you again for coming on. It's always fun to have you doing these lists, and it's always a good time. We'll have to do it again.
Def.
All right. For Johnny Racich, my name's Josh, and as always, thank you for being a friend.